that really don't have anything to do with what we're doing right now, though. So let's re-roll this. We're starting early because, well, kind of had to start early, or I was going to just not do anything. I'm really burnt out over the weekend. It was Easter weekend, of course, so there's not a lot of YouTube content and a lot of stuff there. There was a daily sale over the weekend for another avatar for 1,000 gold. I spent it. We will be probably fine to buy 30 packs, and I don't think you really need to buy more than 30 packs of any expansion anyways. And like, why would I want these specific skins of these lands? Like, this art is nice and all, but why in the world would I want that art when I could instead have something like this? And I already have a good set of land art. So one more character, one more avatar is unlocked, and over the course of the next 6 months, I imagine I'll probably get most of them, as long as I fairly regularly check the daily sales. What else do we have here? This starts in 3 minutes, so we'll do that, but in the meantime we'll just play a game. We need to play a ranked draft, and I don't really want to play a ranked draft of that because in 2 days this ends, and so Wednesday will be a big day. Unfortunately, unlike Hearthstone, we can't come in here and see the new cards. That would be really nice, just a couple days early to look at the new cards. And I imagine with the potential death of comic book stores and game shops, we will start to see more of a focus on promoting cards through Magic Arena instead of advertisements like this that is just a link to their website. So when they start catching up with the times, I think they will. We'll start to see Magic Arena does become the central hub of things. So we have black, green. So I guess we're gonna play green. So let's take our green deck and play. I managed to actually play all of the game The Cave, which is a Double Fine game that on the second playthrough I kind of realized it was an attempt at a modernization of Maniac Mansion. You start with 7 characters, you pick 3 out of that group of 7, you go down into the cave and you solve some platforming puzzles and move forward after you solve the platforming puzzles to solve more platforming puzzles, and eventually you get to the end of the story. That's about all I can really say. Each of the characters is a stereotypical archetype. There's like a paladin, a hillbilly, a time traveler, a scientist, a adventurer. There's creepy psychic kids called the twins that are one character between one pair of twins, and then there's the monk. The twins stand out because it's a story involving kids, and you probably won't get all the bad endings and all the good endings because it would take 6 playthroughs of playing the exact same game over and over again, and that would rather suck. Doesn't look like we're doing great right now as far as the network. That could be lots of reasons. I updated my router. Oh, you know what? I need to go and remember. I keep forgetting to do the things I should do. Is this video playing? No. That wasn't even the thing I needed to do. Alright, let's see. Spin the stab. No blocks. See if that helps a little bit by not playing back the video on my computer at the same time. It's so terrible that the YouTube streaming page automatically starts the video streaming, and it expects that wouldn't hurt your overall bandwidth issues. Yeah, it looks like that's gonna fix it somewhat, although bandwidth is just gonna be an issue, certainly, and there's not a lot I think I can do about that. It might make sense if YouTube streamers and content creators shifted their schedule yet again and decided to not have streams during regular business hours, but nah. So yeah, the cave's problems are there's 7 characters, and it seems like in the early days of development they were going to represent the 7 deadly sins. Now I don't think I can actually name all of the 7 deadly sins, and there definitely were characters that you could say were prideful, wrathful, greedy, not so much. Like, yeah, I guess the adventurer is kind of greedy. But it doesn't really make anything, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because there's no character that's actually lustful. They don't have a story of lust. It's kind of weird. They tried to make the cave kind of kid friendly, but it really isn't. So maybe a 12, 14-year-old, 16-year-old. I wouldn't mind a 16-year-old playing it, but I really wouldn't give it to a 10-year-old, even though the animation and on it makes it kind of look like it's for 10-year-olds. And a major part of that is because the twins' story is them effectively poisoning their family with rat poison, and their dog if you do it right. So it's just like a real dark story. All the stories are dark. It's pretty obvious that the cave is supposed to be an allegory of either a purgatory where you're reliving the final events of your life, or you're living out a dream / hallucination / recreation of the final events of your life, and causing horrible things to happen. Although you're stuck in the cave, so to progress in the game you have to cause the bad things to happen. Even watching a speedrunner, which there's very few speedruns for the game because there aren't any really shortcuts, and that just really ruins the game for everybody, because there needed to be shortcuts or cheats around the puzzles. There's only a couple of places where you can skip through sections and not end up murdering at least one person in each of the 3 characters you pick's moral stories. The entire cave includes 7 sections for the 7 characters, but it then also includes at least 3 separate sections that don't have anything to do with any of the character archetypes that you have to go through in each playthrough. And there is a kind of long tutorial at the beginning and a kind of long wrap up at the end, and it's kind of the exact same area at the beginning and the end. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. There's 2 different ways, and maybe this falls straight on the feet of Ron Gilbert, who directed it, and it certainly goes to show some of the problems with Maniac Mansion too, because it was totally possible, I think, to play Maniac Mansion wrong, pick the wrong 3 characters, and have a very low chance of being able to win the game. Particularly since in Maniac Mansion the characters could die, whereas in the cave they really can't. But the two ways you would have fixed it so that you would just have all 7 characters go forward, and have the players only play as 3 characters. And you really don't even need to have the characters play as 3 characters, because it only has 2-player co-op. It could have been always 2 characters. There's maybe a couple places where you are benefited by having 3 characters. It makes it a little bit easier to figure out. In the same way that if you had 4 characters running around, it would be a little bit better too, because there's a lot of places that you have to walk back and forth and to pick up an item, and you can only hold one item at a time, and it becomes quite the hassle. But it seems to me fairly obvious that Sega, as the publisher, funded the development of the cave. Double Fine took a pitch to Sega, I'm sure, and then Sega, as the developer, funded it. But anytime you have a publisher like Sega, in this case, funding something, then you usually have negotiated numbers, statistics, things like that you'll have to deliver on, and you'll have to actually be able to reach. And it seems pretty obvious that most of Double Fine's games are late and over budget. I don't think Tim Schafer has ever been good at that, and now that Microsoft owns Double Fine, I imagine Tim Schafer will probably get reduced down to a figurehead level. And so I think the way they delivered on the metrics so they wouldn't get sued or lose out on some kind of bonus or something is by having an incredibly large amount of just square footage in the cave, where you're walking from point A to point B and nothing is happening. It is, I would say, at least 55% of the game you're walking left and right, or climbing up and down ladders, and the animation is a little too slow on climbing up and down ladders or up and down ropes. It's not a Super Mario platforming game or anything like that. It's totally just has platforming and you really wouldn't even call it platforming. It's really just it has ladders and caverns, some of which you would expect, but a lot of it is unnecessary. A lot of it is specifically been added just to waste people's time, and that really hurts the game. And then it double hurts the game when you have to play it 3 times in a row to get all 6 of the characters, all 7 of the characters ending, which, take note, means that even if you're playing it perfectly, you can go with the first set of 3 characters and then go with the second set of 3 characters, and then you have to pick 2 characters you've already played as, and then the last remaining character, which for me it was the monk. And the monk's section is at the very bottom of the cave, so the third playthrough I had to go through the tutorial, the first section that you have to do no matter who you pick, the second section you have to do no matter who you pick, then I did the monk, then I did the third section that you have to do no matter who you pick, and then I did the finale. So out of 5 sections there, that was out of 5 sections, only one of them was new, and it wasn't 5 sections actually, because I also had to play the 2 sections I had already played, and all you can really do different to get a good ending or a bad ending is make a very small decision that's easily missable, at the last second before you wrap up the game. So by bringing over the 2 characters I had already seen the good endings on, I then got to see their bad endings, which is totally not worth it because it's just 2 still images. So yeah, you would need a minimum of 6 playthroughs to unlock all of the possible endings, the good endings and the bad endings. And if you play particularly badly, you would also need some more help to get all of the cave paintings, which are the only collectibles in the game, of which there's 7 for each character. So there's 49 cave paintings, which you would think it's probably one shy of 50 that they would have probably tried to negotiate for. The publisher would have tried to negotiate for 50 collectibles in the game. But I guess they probably actually go over 50 because then the cave paintings unlock still images also. So depending on how you look at it, getting the last 2 actually gives you around, let's see, 11 images per character. But it's just so bad the way it's the way the game is designed, and I think that really does fall into Ron Gilbert's playhouse. I liked Ron Gilbert's writing in Monkey Island. There's no writing in the cave. I imagine I would like the writing of Maniac Mansion if I ever got around to playing it. It's a little too old of a game for me, but I really don't think that Ron Gilbert was in his best position directing it. Probably with Tim Schafer and Double Fine also probably hampering him, because I don't think there really is much of a good development team at Double Fine. Now that Microsoft owns them, probably that they have all the support they'd ever need, but back in the day, back in 2013 when the cave was made, it was probably a different case. Also, I would imagine, since Ron Gilbert left LucasArts to make Humongous and a bunch of kids point-and-click adventures, I think that's really where his heart was. And so telling these moral plays and having a darker twist on it really feels like a Tim Schafer idea. And really, if Tim Schafer was going to take that idea and push it forward, he should have been the guy in charge, the director. Destroy a target artifact. Exile a target from the graveyard. That's a pretty useless card. All we really need to do is play green cards so we can just go ahead and attack. But yeah, there's absolutely no dialogue in the cave. The characters don't talk. You could have easily have written the characters to say something and have some kind of dialogue, at least after their own sequences. Let's see that. Well, let's not get rid of that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. There's no sword fighting from like Monkey Island. The cave isn't really a point and click adventure, although it almost feels like one. Because you don't pick up items and really interact with items that much. You do get some items, a few items, and they interact with a few other items, but it's extremely rare. Even though that is kind of the main gameplay mechanic, and it's all so incredibly obvious. Like, you will get a straight pipe, and then you will see two pipes with a hole in the middle, and that straight pipe obviously goes in that hole to connect the two pipes. Yeah. Or at the very beginning of the game, you see boarded up pieces of wood over the entrance, and you get a crowbar and you pull the boarded elements off with the crowbar. Like, very, very straight and obvious things. You don't do anything crazy or anything silly. There's basically no comedy in the story at all, which I think probably would have killed Maniac Mansion when it came out. It would have killed point and click adventures in general. The music's nothing. I can't even remember the music. I can barely even remember the game, having played it all Saturday. It took me about 7 hours to play it 3 times through, and that was probably longer than even the first time I played the cave when it first came out. And I imagine a lot of people didn't even play it 3 times through, let alone the 6 times you would need to get the bad endings. There are some sound effects problems. Like, at least 2 characters make a loud sound when they walk, and there's nothing to address that. There's some UI problems. It doesn't pop up an auto-savings image anywhere, ever, but it definitely is auto-saving, which I don't think that's allowed. Apparently on the console versions, there was a prompt where you press down on the D-pad and it would hide a little indicator telling you how to switch between the 3 characters you picked with the D-pad, up, down, left, and right for each character. But you can press down to hide that and clean up your screen and just have no UI at all. That works, but it's not mentioned anywhere in the instructions on the Steam version or anything like that. It doesn't particularly run very well for a 2013 game being played 7 years later. And for a game that, if it had been programmed in Unity today, would look a lot better and work just the same. It would be better in almost every aspect if it was programmed in Unity. There's way too many art assets in the game. Like, all over the sides of the cave, you'll just see little bits of art. You'll see like a British phone booth, phone box, and you're like, okay, that's not the blue police box, so it's not a direct reference to Doctor Who, and you see it 3 or 4 times. And it just doesn't, it really doesn't serve anything to have somebody have drawn that. And you'll see all kinds of things like that all over the place, just to add atmosphere, just like they were giving a low-level animator or an intern a job. Just animate this thing in 3D and we'll throw it in our game. Now, in all fairness, maybe the 3D models that they were using, they had made for like the Telltale Monkey Island game or some other 3D game that they were working on and already had some assets developed in. But it is really just a lot of fluff that does not benefit the gameplay at all. If there was going to be any Double Fine game coming out relatively around that time that was going to try and stretch and waste the player's time as much as the cave does, I would have assumed it would have been Costume Quest. Because Costume Quest as a kid's RPG could have really gone like the route of Pokemon and just had you play over and over again and had a gotta catch 'em all mentality. But it totally isn't. It's a very linear experience. There's really nothing more to do. Speaking of a Costume Quest, somebody got onto my YouTube channel, watched Costume Quest episode 1. It is labeled by my old labeling system HD 1080p 60 frames per second. That's not a label I use anymore. It is also a label that I cannot just go back and easily remove from old videos that I would. Otherwise I would. But in that case, and in almost every case, I put a large amount of effort, or I put a large amount of effort to make sure I only labeled videos like that where they were actually running at 60 frames per second, the game engines themselves, or at least the game engines were claiming that they would. Let's see, can we look at the graphics here and see, like, frames per second limit 60. It usually is the limit. Magic Arena is actually doing a good job by pointing that out, because no game really gives you a guaranteed steady 60 frames per second hardware wise. You're not going to get that. And this comment said, not true. I'm paraphrasing here, so don't take this as a quote, but the comment was something along the lines of, not true because the game's engine is capped at 30 frames per second, and then at the bottom, this is the part that irritated me, another YouTube liar. Now, the label of HD 1080p 60 frames per second was always an indicator, and this is the reason I don't use it anymore. It was always an indicator of what the footage was being recorded at. So my software was recording at 1080 60. It was never a guarantee or an indicator that the game engine itself was giving a full 1080p 60 out to the recording software. That being said, again, I tried really hard to only ever use that label when the game's settings themselves claim to be 1080 60. And I was upset by that, and I probably need to work on not being upset by that. I was upset for about 30 seconds, and then I hid that user from my channel forever. And I'm not going to waste the energy to go back and unhide them. Particularly since after ignoring it or stewing over it, take your pick, I went back to my computer and I reinstalled Costume Quest, which hasn't been installed for a very long time, and I launched it, and I went into the options, and lo and behold, right under the options of Costume Quest, it says the settings were at 1920 by 1080 at 60 hertz. 60 hertz is cycles per second. It is basically, in computer technology, 1-to-1 with 60 frames per second. So the person was not even true. They weren't even right. By every indication I can see, I may very well have even shown it in the video. I often, in the first video, do show the settings that I set a game at. I may very well have shown it in the video that I had it set at that setting, but even if I didn't, he's totally wrong. Like, it's just not the case. The game engine itself says it's running at 60 hertz. That's 60 frames per second are good enough for me. But I also and this is a YouTuber just basically using a bully pulpit at this point, but so I'll get off this conversation pretty quickly here. In a greater sense, he was wrong, even if he was right. There's no need for anybody to get on a YouTuber's channel that they've never commented on or talked about before and put a comment that calling somebody a liar, particularly if you haven't done the research. Like, you gotta be really, really careful. You gotta have the receipts. You gotta have done the paperwork. You don't make accusations on people until you have every bit of proof that they are being dishonest, because that's just not nice. It's not helpful. Doesn't do anything. Now, in all fairness, this probably isn't even a real person. 99% of all the comments that show up on the internet are probably just Russian bots, troll bots designed to irritate people. Or maybe this was a real person and they were just a troll. But man, that's certainly irritating and dumb. So even though I claim to be a free speech advocate and do believe I am one, I will still hide users and mute them if they're just spamming or if they just come off overly hostile. Had you not just had the person not just immediately called me a liar and put a hostile comment in, if they said if they had framed it as a question, doesn't this game run at 30 frames per second, I would have done the research and go, no, it says 60 hertz. That's 60 frames per second. And we could have had a Discord and a conversation there. But instead, he just got a block and wasted his time and wasted my time and irritated me, which is probably all he really wanted to accomplish in the first place. And so, yeah, life sometimes sucks, but really, if that's my biggest problem this week, I'll be perfectly happy. So everybody has to block this guy. That's weird. You'd think you could block other things. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about the cave, though. It's kind of a disappointment. Oh, yeah, the way I think it should have been done, and I think this probably does fall under the director, a lot of it does, at least, is each of the characters should be characters and not just stereotypical archetypes. You shouldn't have a time traveler, you should have Jezebel, the time traveler. You shouldn't have an adventurer, you should have Dr. Nebraska, the adventurer. You shouldn't have the twins, you should have Ernest and Heidi, the twins. Give them names, give them characters, have them speak, have them talk, have them deny what the puzzles are implying, which is that they did this horrible thing that led to the death of lots of people. Although I guess some of the characters actually only led to the death of one person. But most of the stories led to the death of lots of people. But had there been anything other than just the cave acting as the narrator, because the cave really has most of the dialogue, and all the other dialogue belongs to non-playable characters just talking to you. There needed to be something that where the people denied it, and then there was a kind of like the movie Clue type story where you're seeing the cave say you did this, and they would deny it, and maybe they did do it, maybe they didn't, maybe on the bad ending they actually did cause a lot of people to die, maybe on the good ending they actually didn't. That's exactly what happens in the game. It just doesn't in any way actually affect the puzzles. The good endings just make it seem like the events in the cave were magically undone, for lack of a better explanation. I think what you do is you have all the characters play in one playthrough. So you take out the element of the Maniac Mansion where you pick 3 characters. Perhaps you break them down into groups of 3. Perhaps you break them down into individual groups, but you make it seem like the player has not finished the game until they have completely done every single puzzle, because it really does feel like a lot of people could have played the cave once and seen just 3 of the 7 puzzles available and been bored with it and unsatisfied and not tried to play a second time. It doesn't really even say anything or do anything to encourage you to go back and play again. I imagine there was a lot of people that did play Maniac Mansion and only played it once or twice. If you won the first time you played Maniac Mansion, which would have been a tall order, I wouldn't be surprised if you wouldn't want to go back and play it multiple times. Even in that case, that is the mentality of a very old style of video game, PC game, not a 2013 game. The other way you could have fixed it is you could have had an A story, a B story, and a C story. So if you were going to only let 3 players play each playthrough, you could have said, well, the A story, you pick 3 characters, and then those 3 characters are eliminated from your selection at the beginning of the B story. And what you could have had is, instead of having 3 individual group puzzles that aren't associated with any of the individual characters, instead of doing those 3 puzzles, which were there was a miner, there was a zoo, and there was an island. So when you play the cave, you have to go through the miner, the zoo, and the island in that order every time you do a playthrough, a run. It would have been better if in the A story you just ran into the miner, and in the B story you just ran into the zoo, and in the C story you just ran into the island. That would have sped up the process and eliminated the repetition. They clearly were so desperate to have as much repetition as possible in the game. They just absolutely wanted that, so that the game barely scratches 7 hours if you're trying to get all the good endings, and it really probably doesn't take much more than 10 hours, probably slightly less than 10 hours to get all the good endings and the bad endings. There's also a problem with the cave's achievements. They are very early first-gen achievements, asking you to do a lot of weird stuff that you just generally would not normally do. Easily missable stuff. Things that for that reason could add 2 or 3 playthroughs to the game. I also, in the effort to get an achievement, crashed the game. There's really no reason around that at all. Let's see, do I want to save this guy? No, I think we'll let that guy die. But yeah. So I managed a game crash on a game that is incredibly simplistic. The cave also doesn't feel like a game that would benefit in modern times if it was an iPad game. You could almost certainly play it on the iPad, or you could put it on like Apple Arcade too. It would be very playable there. Or you, even with a relatively large cell phone screen, you could play it on a cell phone. But it doesn't really benefit from that, because you're not going to really... I don't think too many players of it are going to play it and then take a break and then come back and do another playthrough. Instead, you're going to just play it 2 or 3 times in a row at most, and then you're going to burn out on it and never play it again. Let's see. What does this do? Scry. Interesting. Yeah, And I was thinking about when I was playing it, whether there would have been a possibility that they would have set them up for a sequel had the cave been good. Not really. You could certainly make some other archetype characters, but they've covered a lot of them with 7. It'd be hard to figure out another 7 characters. Although not impossible, because of each of the archetypes, like the paladin, he runs into a king, a queen, a guard. It wouldn't be hard to take a character that he ran into in his life and his story and make them the character in the sequel. Or you could just gender swap, which I will say the cave and Double Fine is woke, so no surprise there that they figured out how to have a nice balance of genders in the game. It's actually very nice. It's not done ridiculously or in a bad way. The time traveler from the future is a female, the scientist is a female, the adventurer is a female. It all feels right. Let's see. But yeah, it's not really good. And the other game that Ron Gilbert made that I know of, and I kind of just learned with Double Fine, and I really don't know how much of his involvement there really was in all that. This is the second, I think, Asian named player I've run into today. Interesting. Maybe now that Japan is starting to force people inside, they're playing more Magic Arena. That might be the case. I don't know. I don't know if Magic the Gathering has any popularity outside the United States at all. But yeah, the other game that they made was the Ron Gilbert was involved with Double Fine. It was called Death Spank, and at least the first one, maybe not the sequel, Song of Virtue, which is a comedic RPG game, kind of a mix between Costume Quest and Brutal Legend, where it's not really targeted towards kids, and so they can go a little bit further, and it was a kind of fun RPG that isn't super long, and it predated Costume Quest. And the cave also kind of oddly predated Broken Age, I'm fairly certain. Broken Age was kickstarted, and thus they could take their sweet time to decide that when that game was done. And Broken Age is a much more traditional point-and-click adventure game. I've lost, so we might as well just attack. This is a weird cycle, certainly, as I'm going to move off. It's not like we even have a lot of news or anything to talk about, and like I said all of last week, that's probably just going to be the case going forward. But Double Fine is in kind of this weird cycle where they start off as being the remnants of LucasArts games, and they kind of just keep going in circles, with Psychonauts 1 being their only game that's really worth major coverage and major attention, where everything else has gotten mediocre attention and mediocre coverage and are arguably mediocrely good. They've just never really been able to go big and have a major success since Psychonauts. And so if Psychonauts 2 doesn't succeed for them, I imagine That'll be it for Double Fine. It may be it for Double Fine anyways now that Microsoft owns them. In fact, there's a decent argument to be made that it already is it for Double Fine, because once they were bought by Microsoft, that probably was the end of what Double Fine really has been. This is going to start in 3 hours. I just realized. Not in 3 minutes. I wish they would put a seconds counter there, even if it's a fake seconds counter. Alright, now it's just black spells. How many days until the rank ends? 17 days? Alright, this is probably one of the best days to focus on playing ranked that I'm gonna have. Speaking of playing card games, I did install and play Gwent out of boredom on Android. They're way too late on the party to try and make Gwent happen. But it is different than, I guess, the Gwent I played in The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3 Gwent had 3 lanes. There was like a melee lane, an archery lane, and a ballista lane. So it was a bunch of trebuchets and ballista. Gwent at some point got readapted and adjusted to only have 2 lanes. Apparently, at least for the cell phone version. I think Gwent at some point also had a kind of single player story experience. There was some kind of DLC added. I don't know if that's on the Android version or not, where you go to different levels and you can kind of grind out for materials. I wasn't seeing any of that. So while I feel like Gwent is majorly improved, and it actually is a different thing, and it's actually an incredibly faster experience than playing Magic or Hearthstone, because all you have to do is you maybe, depending if you start first or not, you start with 4 cards. Every turn you play 1 card, you use a hero ability like once, maybe twice per round, and once or twice per game, and you play 3 rounds or first to 2 victories out of 3 rounds. So it's slightly confusing to explain without showing. I could probably just install Gwent and show it, and I might need to do a spotlight at some point. But generically speaking, it is just playing 1 card per turn, then your turn ends automatically. You very rarely even could trigger the timer if you, as long as you just play that first card. Every card does something, and none of them are too crazy like Magic cards. They're pretty generic, simplistic things, and what you're just trying to do is get points. Points are your attack. The characters don't have a health. Their health is equal to their points. So instead of a 1/1 in Gwent, it is just a 1. And in the way you played Gwent in Witcher 3, it was whoever's lane, whether it was the melee, the archery, or the ballista lane, whoever's lane was stronger than the other lane would get the points. In the new version, it doesn't seem like that's even the case. It seems like you just get a combination of your life points in those 2 lanes, and lane does not really play much of a role at all. This guy's going for a hand destruction deck, which may not really work for him. So yeah, I kind of liked it. Gwent, I kind of loved it. Unfortunately, what I hated And what kills it is it seems to me like there is no way to do a free-to-play experience in it at all. You can play the game, you can grind out, you can do daily quests, you can get enough experience over a long time to probably unlock all the cards, but there are clearly elements in it. There's a season pass that requires money, there's skins that require only money. Everything that requires money can only be purchased with money. There's no dust system that is the equivalent of money. And Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering at least have that for most cases. There are plenty of cases in Magic where you actually do need to use gems, and it's very difficult to get gems for free, but it is doable. Hearthstone is the most generous in that way because there was basically nothing in Hearthstone that you couldn't grind out and get as a free-to-player. That really made Hearthstone really nice. If it weren't for Activision Blizzard screwing it up in every other way. So, yeah. It kind of sucks because I might have played Gwent further, and I haven't yet uninstalled the game, but I don't think I'm going to do too much there. If I didn't explain the game quite perfectly, you play for points by putting characters down, and you only have like 10 cards in your deck. Whoever has the most points at the end of a game or end of a round. Let's see, can we do something else there? Yeah, you just play for points at each round. It is a very tight game. It is, though, unfortunately, also kind of limited by having to have artwork that is just from the Witcher 3 universe, when it would have been nicer if you could just have different characters from different universes in there. If the Fallout, no, if the CD Projekt Red game comes out and has a card game that is Gwent 2.0, and in that case there are just all kinds of creatures, fantasy, sci-fi, all of it just mixed together. Because in CD Projekt Red it would be very easy to write that there's some kind of like virtual reality game that everybody plays, for them to push Gwent 2.0 and have more characters and have more abilities and more things, and potentially put out expansions. Gwent really can't have too much expansions, and that's the problem with it, is that even if you try to dig deep into the lore of all the Witcher books and all the Witcher universe, you can only go so far. There's only so many monsters. There's only so many Geralt of Rivia's. You even see in Magic that there's 3, 4, 5 different Planeswalker characters that all have the same name and are the same character but have different abilities. Whereas Cyberpunk could get around that pretty easily and just constantly add more content. I don't know if CD Projekt Red, though, really wants to support a collectible card game, or if it was just kind of their weird experiment. Gwent, as it stands, does almost make a interesting argument for Artifact 2.0, because where Gwent, instead of having one lane like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering does, Gwent has 2, and that are horizontal and you see them at all times, where Artifact was 3 lanes that were on the side and you had to swap the boards. And Artifact 2.0 is going to shrink out the camera zoom so you can see all 3 lanes, but you still will be playing with 3 lanes, which arguably will still make Artifact like way too complicated and for its own good. But yeah, it does change up the gameplay a little bit, and I can't help but wonder if maybe Valve just feels that they have to have Artifact play really, really different from Hearthstone and Magic so that they don't get sued. I would assume that the fact that Hearthstone has been doing business here for 5-6 years and not getting sued by Wizards of the Coast probably is an indicator that anybody else could do something similar. Yeah. Yeah, but mostly I've been getting bored, and I'm really proud. I didn't do anything on Sunday, and a lot of that just has to do with insomnia. Like the truth is, I just woke up really late and then kind of just sat around and watched TV, and then frankly this happened. So yeah, my sleep schedule is going to sleep around 7 or 8 in the morning and waking up at around 6 or 7 in the evening, which really kills productivity. But what's not super killing productivity now is I think my back and hips have healed fairly well. There's the problem with any of these injuries is that they're never going to really heal perfectly. I'm still using ice and such, but I've seen some kind of major improvement. I put more cushions on my chair so the chair won't kill me so much for just sitting in it, which that was a problem before even I hurt my back. So I'm in a good position to start powering through and recording some more footage if I so choose and keep my focus on it. I think I mentioned last recording that I updated my router's firmware. Had to update it again. It wasn't quite working. This is the problem with installing DDWRT, is that you install the most recent one, then less than a week later there's a new most recent beta to fix the bug in the current beta. It really feels like there's probably only 2 major contributors to DDWRT, and then hopefully several minor contributors. And DDWRT is probably sharing code with OpenWRT and several other projects to make that less of a daunting statement. And less of a difficult task. But yeah, so I had to update the update, and it seems like it's working now fine. The problem was the Wi-Fi wasn't connecting. It was saying the password was wrong, and I was like, no, I haven't changed the password. And it would connect, and then it would a couple hours later disconnect again, which sounds like a pretty typical bug to run into. But my next goal is to play Oxenfree, which is kind of a point and click adventure that I think will probably fall quite nicely under that kind of category of something to compare against the Cave, because a lot of it does seem like it is played around the mountain too. I haven't ever played Oxenfree, and I know that it isn't really built around, it isn't a Double Fine game or anything like that. So Ron Gilbert eventually went on to make Thimbleweed Park, and I didn't realize that, and that's probably the closest to a point-and-click adventure game that would be worth playing for his type of writing. I really do feel like after playing The Cave, though, I want to see his writing. I don't want to see his directing. The gameplay direction in The Cave was not present, really, and the general person in charge, whether that was the director or somebody else, really dropped the ball on improving little things that could have easily been improved upon. Darn it. No. Didn't move fast enough. So we'll tap that one. So we need to block something there. And then do we need to block anything anywhere else? Right, so this guy has vigilance. Alright. Next, we'll attack with this, 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 and this. And we'll see what happens. This probably is just going to lose the game for me. Can't really do anything there. Alright. What we needed to do is just wait here and just play Bola Citadel. That totally was the thing to do. Let's just wait till we get Bola Citadel, play it, and maybe if I can slow down a little bit, maybe I can pull that off still. Let's see if I can bring up my Twitter feed and see if there's been any news in the last hour, because we've been going for about an hour. And then we'll start covering the games that came out on Steam, and that's pretty much it. It is worth mentioning that it does seem like this Monday has more adult-themed games, so I'm not sure if maybe because of the Easter weekend they were a little bit delayed on that part, or if there was some other factor as to why. I would assume that that's Easter and not COVID-19. Like that would just be my default thought. But overall, this weekend not a lot came out, and I think that'll be pretty much the case for a lot of people. That a lot of things will just not actually come out, because until this whole social isolating thing gets done, and who knows when that'll be done. So moving on, Tech Raptor has an article here. Boneworks update has been released. It includes new guns and physics improvements. What is interesting here, I think, with the Boneworks game is the bar, no pun intended, has been raised. So anything Boneworks tries to add or do is probably in a direct attempt to compete somewhat, or at least be a close second to Half-Life Alyx. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Valve decides to put an update in Half-Life Alyx to kind of react and add content that they saw in Boneworks. And then, as a side note, I saw an accessory for the Nintendo Switch that gives you buttons and a shake motion sensor to play like Pinball Arcade or Pinball FX3. I guess both of those are on the Switch. It's kind of an interesting idea, but it was like a $70 accessory, and all it really did is put the buttons on the top and bottom of the Switch turned on its side. So you're looking at, relatively speaking, a rather tiny tiny screen that you're trying to somewhat emulate the experience of playing pinball. That's probably not something you would really want. Now, what I'm thinking about, if this check stimulus happens and I was gonna waste the money, I'm wondering, could I get one of those virtual pinball tables that's like a real pinball cabinet with a TV in it? Like, how much would that cost? Would I have to build it myself? Is there a way I could actually pull that off and not end up wasting a lot of money because of that? Because there's certainly a lot of opportunity there that if I was to get like a digital pinball table, I may only be able to stand in front of it and play it for a very short amount of time. So yeah, I'm having a little bit of fun and fantasizing what I would do if that check ever actually clears, which is an if, not a win as far as I'm concerned. But I imagine my more practical, intelligent side will say, save it for an emergency, and that would be my recommendation for everybody else. The fact that people can't save money, the fact that people are constantly in this situation where they haven't saved money. I would even argue, if you have like bills and debts that you can't pay and you're getting a stimulus check to pay this 1 month, but then you kind of know you won't be able to pay the next month, you might as well just start not paying now. You might as well file for bankruptcy with that stimulus money. You're probably better off that way if you can get around that. Particularly if you don't have student loans and you just have like a ton of other kinds of unsecured debts. Like, now would be a great time to reset and restart. I imagine we will see, as the court systems start to open up in the United States, bankruptcies go through the roof. There will be just a ton of business bankruptcies, certainly, and sole proprietorships, small business bankruptcies, to the point where I imagine it'll just be rubber stamp city as far as individual bankruptcies also. So, and really never a better time to go bankrupt if you have to go bankrupt. It's never a good time per se, but getting out from bad debt would be great. And I'm not sure how the rest of the economy really is going to be set up, but yeah. Unfortunately, that has nothing to do with video games, so let's move on. We have a game here called Silent Sector on Steam. I feel like the S sound that I make, and this probably might just be that I have developed some small lisp, but it feels like maybe my microphone picks it up a little bit too much. I have a pop filter So theoretically, I can go pop, 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 and not have the filter pop, but the S sound doesn't seem to really want to do anything. Speaking of not wanting to do anything, this just looks like a space fly around game that I'm never interested in. $8.99 discounted English. This looks like your kind of game as a shoot 'em up type space game, kind of asteroids game. It doesn't look as terrible as some of the other ones. Let's see if we can cancel out of this. Well, it looks like we're gonna have to close that window, and we'll see what happens there. Close and relaunch, and hopefully don't make me log back in. That's always the risk, is that it's gonna make me log back in. Alright, didn't make me log back in, thank goodness. TechRaptor has an article here. Wonderling jumps at every chance for innovation. This looks like a kind of hype article for a platforming game. I need to figure out what an I want to be that guy type game means. Whether that is the same as what I describe games as Super Meat Boy, like frustration platformers that have a bunch of spikes. Because I know I want to be the guy does have that as an element, but there's every time I see a speedrun event, there seems to be more and more mods of I want to be that guy type games, or I want to be the Boshi, or I want to be the hero, or some. It's always I want to be something. There we go, we got a free victory. And I will take that and be happy. We're still getting like our uncommon cards that we don't have before, filling out that thing. As far as Wonderling, it just kind of looks like a Switch kids platformer. It doesn't look particularly interesting. And see, I already see the beginning of the end. So either we're gonna just go for a hardcore stream in which I'm just gonna be silent, and I don't know if I really want to do that because there's nobody on the chat. So here's where I don't shill too much at the beginning. I shill a lot at the end. But here's where I'm gonna shill and say, if anybody wants to start a conversation, now would be the perfect time, because there's definitely a opportunity here where I'm willing to play for two more hours maybe, instead of just 1 more hour until we're just done with the news. And it's gonna get really quiet and really boring if I have nothing new to say, which there really isn't a lot new to say, and I don't really want to just pull out one of the old rants and try to get back onto that idea. I mean, I could mention that I saw a headline that said the Pope suggested universal basic income. I wish that would happen, certainly. And I will definitely say, if anybody had the clout to potentially start that conversation and potentially make it actually happen, the Pope would be a person. Now, in all fairness, the Pope and the Vatican itself has billions, if not trillions of dollars, and art and gold and things like that. Just priceless things that certainly. So if they wanted to, Vatican City could establish universal basic income of some small amount and set down the framework for them to personally pay every single person on the planet some small amount. Maybe a penny, maybe a nickel, maybe a dime, maybe $1. Uh, maybe $100. I wouldn't be surprised if they could really send out maybe $1,000 to every single citizen. Thousands a steep thing. $1,000 times like 7 billion people, but wouldn't that be $7 trillion a year? Maybe the Vatican does have that much money. And certainly you would affect people vastly differently if you were giving people, say, $100 instead of $1,000 a month. Because that, like, for somebody in the United States, $100 check is nice, but it's not going to change your life. For somebody in China, $100 check would be vastly major life improvement. Certainly, of course, the real implementation of universal basic income would be with each individual country, and it would be different. Some countries would definitely never do it, and some countries would. United States would probably be one of the last countries to do it. But it's important to get that concept out. And the Pope in particular, he has the right mentality and angle and perspective to discuss that as an idea, because it's about human. He can explain it not from a greedy capitalistic capitalism is good and people will pull themselves up from the bootstraps mentality. He can say, no, humans are just human beings. They deserve to not suffer. They deserve to not go hungry. And because of that, we think everybody deserves to avoid that, those pitfalls. And it is pretty much in line with Judeo-Christian values, as I understand it, that people would give to a poor box or give to the poor. Even in ancient Jewish times, you would give to the poor one way or another. Universal basic income is effectively giving to the poor and the needy. So can't really disagree with him supporting it. But also, it is certainly fair to say that the only reason why universal basic income is being talked about by anybody with any authority, any establishment person, which you can't get more establishment than the Vatican, is because they want to maintain power and control through the capitalistic system. If you really just wanted to see to it that people got their needs met, you wouldn't give them a check for some amount every month. You would give them some kind of credit or ration of food, clothing, water, housing, medicine, things that are basic needs that people would need. And we have some of that conflict getting reported on right now, where the food banks are getting heavily used in the United States because lots of people lost their jobs, and there is a complete disconnect between the food banks not having enough food and the farms in the United States dumping food and trashing it. Like, the story I saw was that a milk producer dumped thousands upon thousands of gallons of unprocessed milk because he could not simply just give it to the to food banks or turn it into cheese or something like that without it costing him way more money than what he would get from subsidies from just dumping it and making it and not using it, because you can only get government subsidies as a farmer in the United States if you don't sell it, don't give it away, don't use it in any way. It has to be this total loss scenario. So the capitalist subsidy like mentality, their indirect conflict with what a communist or socialist mentality would be, which would be, why don't we just publicize all the farms? Farms are constantly failing and constantly running into problems. So why don't we just make all those farmers government's employees? And when they have a bunch of milk that they can't sell, or that they just have overproduction, the government can take that milk and give it to people who need it, or turn it into cheese. It's a very simplistic, very easy solution. It's way easier than the current system we have right now with farming and subsidies. The farming system in the United States is a mess, particularly right now. Mostly based around the push and the lobbying to produce corn instead of producing, say, soybeans to feed people. So they make corn, and then they throw the corn in as fillers in as an ethanol in the gasoline, fillers that water down food for humans, fillers that water down food for dogs and pets. We way overproduce corn in the United States. We also probably underproduce. Yeah, we definitely underproduce rice. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of underproduce cotton too, like fabric and things like that. Like the things we're growing are totally wrong, and there's not enough of a demand really in the United States for even the rice that we do grow, or rice doesn't sell for enough in the United States. So we still somehow seem to be growing rice and selling it to like China, which really makes no sense. So yeah, that's one of the old style rants, but I really don't have enough energy to go through it again. So let's go back to the video game news. For Honor Year 4 Season 2 has been delayed due to coronavirus. It's ridiculous that For Honor is getting any more content. Like, for 4 years plus, for the 4 years that For Honor has been out, every time I've heard about it, I've thought, boy, are they trying really hard. Ubisoft is trying really hard to make For Honor a thing and make it succeed. They did a reboot, I think in the second year, and tried to change it up and improve it also, and that didn't really go anywhere either. But yeah, every single time I hear anything about For Honor, all I can think is it has just been a huge waste of money and effort to make something popular that was doomed to never be popular. It just had no chance at all. And I would say that's probably true for any sword and shield player versus player game. The irony is, for as much as Ubisoft has tried to make For Honor popular, like totally accurate battle simulator and a couple other ones, I think there's one called Sword and Sorcery. Those games have proven to be way more popular. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. EA patents matching based on retention rate. So rage quitters potentially would get matched up with other rage quitters. EA seems to like to patent a lot of things and waste their money patenting things instead of wasting their money making AAA games, and that's why there really hasn't been a good EA AAA game in quite a long time. And a patent is only worth as much as you can actually defend it, and I imagine that patent's going to be severely limited in what it could actually defend, because I'm fairly certain retention rate has been a consideration in matchmaking before this point. Right. What can we do? I can attack, and then I lose. I can tap creatures. That's one thing I can do. See. Next we have a game on Steam called Tavern Cards, which looks like a VR game. I watched a small portion of a VR playthrough of a recent Doctor Who game with the newest, I think her name's Jodie Whittaker Doctor. It looked terrible, and it had nothing to do with Jodie Whittaker as the new Doctor or anything like that. I don't think I haven't seen any of the episodes, but from what I hear, she's not particularly good. She's not well written, and a lot of it I think is not her fault. But the game itself, as a VR game with the weeping angels, just looked dumb. It looked really, really dumb being played there in VR by player. So I'll leave that at that. But I didn't even remember when it came out. This game, Tavern Cards, looks like it's probably a low effort game. It seems like it's kind of rock, paper, scissors in VR for no reason. 89 cents discounted. And maybe it isn't in VR. It just looks like it's in VR. English only. Yeah, it actually has no VR support at all. Wow. Well, then it just looks like a low effort rock, paper, scissors game. Let's see. We're gonna tap anything. This guy has so many cards, though, he could overpower me fairly easy. So I'm getting messed up because I have too many Bolas Citadels on the field. Like too many Bolas Citadels in my deck. Just drawing 3 of those. So let's see what we can do with the blocker. You start by killing that, and that should save something. And then you kill one of those, and I probably still lose. So How many cards do I need? I have 5, 6, 7. I would need 3 more cards on the field to move further in this direction. I think this next game I am going to have to label as potentially triggering. That is not something I do, but I'm gonna warn you, this next game looks like it is either a cheap Chinese horror game or a Japanese game, indie game, that is really cheap also. It seems to me what it says the game is, it's a first-person game that uses a keyboard and mouse to block evil spirits and reassure the girl. Reassure the girl. I think maybe it was supposed to be rescue the girl, or even this is supposed to be like The Exorcist and it's supposed to be exorcise the demon from the girl. But by the real looks of it, on the screenshots, there is a demon, creepy Japanese lady, ghost, but it kind of also looks like you're just tying down this girl to a bed. Which, if there was a scene where they were tying down the girl in The Exorcist, I don't recall it being shown or being particularly graphic, because that would have been a scene out of context, and even in context it would have been pretty disturbing. If I was going to remake The Exorcist today, I almost certainly would start the entire movie with that scene. You show a young priest and an old priest getting together, and they're bringing rope, and they're making knots, and they're preparing, and then you have the first twist where they walk in the room, and then they immediately rush and grab the girl and hold her down to the bed and tie her down. That would be very, very disturbing scene to start The Exorcist with. And you definitely would want to play it up like, oh, are these priests actually the bad guys? Compared to, it would be a mistake to try to remake The Exorcist, certainly, but compared to the movie, like a lot of the Exorcist movie, which I haven't sat through either, but I think like the first hour of it is really just talking, and so you don't even really see the girl, the possessed girl, until later, after the first hour. But yeah, take that mentality as we look at this game called Rigola. So here's the creepy demon. I guess I failed to mention that her entire front part of her body is missing. So here you see there's a girl. She's tied to the bed. You're running around with these spirits, and then you're holding her down. And then see, it kind of feels a little bit more like a holding her down, groping game than anything else. It seems like you're tickling her feet more than anything. Let's play some more, and then we'll show some more of this. So yeah, this feels kind of fetish-like. There was another game that was kind of a low-effort Japanese game that I put on the fall list, and I don't think it ever got any more content, so it was at a certain... I don't think it ever hit a point where it would be reasonable to purchase it or show it. But in that game, you were running around, and you were basically catching girls and tying them up in shibari, a Japanese rope bondage. And that too was to exorcise demons out of them. It is clearly, in that instance at least, it was 100% clearly obvious a contrivance. But here, this might just be a bad game. So, let's see. Here you can see there's some blood or spirited energy leaving her. But then there's some other things. And then here's a very blurry screenshot. This is probably about 5 minutes of content by the looks of it. It looks very asset flippy. 99%. Here's the description. Asterisk, this game is for bondage and tickling lovers. Alright. English only. So, yeah. What can I say about a game like this? I guess I'll put it on the fall list and we'll see what kind of reviews it gets. It's probably not much. Although, if they reach their niche audience, and their niche audience just wants to tie down a girl and tie down an anime girl and tickle her, they may be very satisfied with that. So, yep. Unfortunately, I'm logged out of my Steam account, so I'll have to put that on the fall list later. Probably isn't going anywhere though. It probably will fall directly in the same line as the other game, as just being super simplistic, interactive storytelling more than an actual game. Or tech demo more than an actual game might be a better way to describe it. For something completely different, we have a game on Steam here called Box Boxing, and while I would love like a boxing game similar to Punch-Out, this looks like this is just a low effort polygonal, in the sense that everything's a boxing simulator. $7.74 discounted for VR, which is really crazy, as way too cheap for a VR game. Giant Bomb, in their Aftermath show, was asked if they thought Half-Life Alyx had helped increase the odds of VR being a success, and they came out and said no, actually, in their opinion, it had actually hurt the odds of VR becoming a success, because it just went to show how expensive it was to actually to actually go through all the VR elements and get a VR headset, get the game and play it. And it also showed how expensive it was to develop VR games, because Half-Life Alyx probably cost a lot more than Valve would prefer to admit. So, unlike the NES, where when the Nintendo Entertainment System was out in America, it was very easy to make a cartridge and put it, and even if you didn't get the Nintendo seal of approval and you just made a bootleg, effectively it wouldn't really be a bootleg, it would just be an unlicensed product for the NES, unendorsed product for the, yeah, unlicensed I guess might be the right case, right word to use. The kind of flood of cheap games, while still maintaining some quality, riding that line, I think really helped the second wave of video games, NES era video games from succeed. It helped it succeed, where VR doesn't have that benefit. Third-party titles are the only thing that are gonna sell new platforms, whether it's Stadia, Apple Arcade, VR. Take your pick. We need you need third-party support. Okay. What do we want to do here? I think we just wait. Let's go ahead and resolve this. Next we have on Steam here a game called Redemption Girls, which is anime pictures that I assume have been licensed in jigsaw puzzle form. Very simplistic jigsaw puzzle form. It's not tagged as having any adult content. It's 59 cents discounted. English, Russian as a second language probably means this is a low effort Russian game. It's not until you get way down there do you see Chinese. I don't even know if Japanese is the absolute last option. They all claim to have full audio support, which of course they don't really. So yeah, normally we'd see those type of games coming out on a Friday, but seems like they've opted to put them out on a Monday. Which this is a small bit of information. Like any deviation from previously unobserved behavior does give you more of a basis to kind of assume what future behavior will be as far as the secrecies of how the Valve storefront works. I have been kind of assuming that there's one person that looks at adult games that and approves or disapproves of adult games at Valve, and he seems to stack up all the adult games and release them on Friday every 2 weeks so that they, I assume, get the least amount of attention and are just out of the way of other releases, which typically a AAA game would release like on a Tuesday or a Monday evening, so that people could write reports around it, news articles. Not that there's much of a chance that a low effort adult jigsaw puzzle game would ever get any reports written about it anyways. Next we have a game on Steam called The Siren's Call. This is incredibly dark. I will say my footage probably is going to be relatively dark for the cave. Like, I just didn't want to turn up the brightness. I was just being obstinate. More than anything else, I just wanted to leave it at the default brightness and say this is what you get. It looked pretty dark on OBS. But yeah, this also looks incredibly dark. It looks like it's probably an asset flip game that's trying to hide the fact that it's an asset flip game by making it a horror game and setting it in the dark. Early access 1% off for $5.93, English and allegedly full audio. Saying it's a 20-part episodic thriller. Yeah, right. I am not getting on board for that ride. No way. No way am I going to look at something that looks like a low effort asset flip horror game and say, alright, I'm willing to entertain playing 19 more parts of this game. No way. I wouldn't play 19 different Final Fantasies if they tried to tell me that all of the Final Fantasy games up until this point synergize greatly and make a like the best story you could ever see. Now, of course, that will affect more people than just me, because if Final Fantasy VII's remake does turn into a 4-part game instead of maybe a 3-part game or a 2-part game, there may be major diminishing returns by the time you hit the 4th part or the 5th part. If you hit a 6th part, like, all bets are off at that point. Also, I've heard hot takes, and that's pretty much all I can say, that the first section of Final Fantasy VII Remake is either too easy or too hard. Some modes are like, one difficulty seems to be too easy, and the difficulty right above that seems to be too hard. It seems like people are happy that the remake really fleshes out the first area and adds a bunch of more content and story and more things to do. And people seem to be fairly alright with the way the first part ended, which seems to be slightly different than the way the story went the first time. It'll be, I guess, an interesting question to see how much content gets reused in the second part. If you start seeing quests getting repeated in the second part of Final Fantasy VII, or the same chocobo racing mini game being done over and over again, I assume there's some kind of chocobo racing mini game or something like that. If anything, I would want remakes of Final Fantasy games to be streamlined experiences, though, not longer experiences. But maybe, but I'm not really the true fan base for Final Fantasy games anyways, so I could be totally wrong about that. Let's do this. Alright, so do I want to play this? Or do I want to risk? Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Ultimo Reno 2, which kind of looks like a 90s RPG game. It seems very much like it's trying to do some name confusion with like Ultima Online or something like that. It looks terrible. So, $4.74 discounted as an MMO. English and Spanish. With English full audio. Which in an MMO can't possibly be true. Next, we have a game on Steam called Tower of God, which looks like is a top-down Diablo-esque strategy game. And doesn't look very well animated. Turn-based action RPG. $2.99, way too cheap. Bunch of languages. Another easily dismissed game. And yeah, much like last week, we pretty much are going to end up dismissing the vast majority of games. I didn't even open some of the games. There was a game called Love This Game, and then there was obviously a exact copy paste of that game called Loathe This Game. It was pretty obvious that there was just somebody flooding the Steam market with garbage games, so I didn't even bother to open them. I swear, every time I cough, sneeze, or feel any kind of ache or pain, the fear comes over me. It's like, oh, do I have the COVID-19? Is this how I finally die? But I am fairly certain I'm just sneezing right now because my fan's blowing a little cold and seasonal allergies are starting to kick up. But I suppose if you if you never hear from me again, if I just go silent in the next during this whole COVID-19 thing, you might as well assume that I was one of the few. Although frankly it is right now kind of a really small number of people that have died from COVID-19. Then it's a disturbingly large amount of people for the amount of time it's been, but it hasn't decimated the population or anything like that. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and attack here and hope that's cool. I don't think anybody has death touch. Probably should have taken that guy out. Come to think of it. Well, whatever. Next we have a game on Steam called Maverick. This probably is an asset flip first person shooter. The problem here is you're seeing people with guns, and then you're seeing rather tight, narrow hallways and buildings, which is not really what you would want to see. And the only characters I see are just a bunch of SWAT people, and then mostly empty rooms otherwise. And then there's this guy. Let's see. Soldier and single player campaign against SWAT and agents. So you're trying to take out the police for some reason. $6.29 discounted English only. Yeah, there's not enough there. And if you are going to play a first person shooter, you want at least some of the scenes to be outside, to show that you are outside. For as much as first person shooters also look like asset flip games, if you're running around the generic forest, yeah, you need some of that, or generic desert or something. You need more variety. You can't just have an entire game where you're running around a building. If you do something like that, then you end up with a game like Fear 1, which somehow was popular when it came out many years ago, but definitely does not look great as far as a game when I played it a few months ago. Alright. This one can't block this turn. Okay, well, resolve that. And do a bunch of damage to me. And can we win? Alright, well, this is gonna try and take us out, so gotta do this. Actually, if I make it another turn, I might be able to survive. Block this one. Block this one. Okay. Next attack for 3. And then play this. Taste of Death. And then play this. And do that. And then go ahead and eat that. And put that on the field. Put that on the field. Eat that. Yeah, I am surprised we're gonna win here, but we're gonna win here. Capcom put out a press release here. Resident Evil 3 has shipped 2 million units 5 days after its release. There is also talk that Resident Evil 4 is in development, although it seems like the team that is making it is not perhaps the people that you would want to make it, and there's definitely some questions about kind of what it will be like, because if it is just like a remake in the same way that Resident Evil 2's remake and Resident Evil 3 remake happens, it's going to be a very tight comparison to what Resident Evil 4 is, because Resident Evil 4 is still a very modern game. Now, so it might not be that. It may just be a port of Resident Evil 4 to make it run a little bit smoother, and that may very well be the only thing that people want, is just a little bit better graphics and a little bit smoother, but otherwise a shot for shot, beat for beat remake of the original game. Because you're going to find it, I think, people's opinions of the gameplay and the level layout of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 were never that high. So nobody was really upset that they got changed. People, I think, would be really upset if things got changed around a lot in Resident Evil 4. It would be basically making a different game and calling it Resident Evil 4. Or if you change much of anything. Even getting rid of like cheesy one-line comments. Like, people haven't really been complaining that there hasn't been a Master of Unlocking or Jill Sandwich comments in the 2 remakes so far. They're gonna be kind of upset if even if they, I guess the one thing that would be most likely to get changed in Resident Evil 4 is when Ashley at the end of the game propositions Leon, the president's daughter, propositions him and says, "Hey, would you want to basically have sex?" and he turns her down. Ashley's like supposed to be like a 19-year-old, 18-year-old. Like, I'm not sure what age they really gave her, but he's also supposed to be protecting her, and I don't think the Secret Service, there's such thing as a Secret Serviceman with benefits. Well, although, who knows, it could have happened. So that would be the most likely story plot, which is really just a throwaway, bad, cheesy line at the end of the game. If that got changed, people would be upset. If some of the other cheesy lines of dialogue got changed, if some of the puzzle layout got changed in the game, people would probably be upset. They basically have to shot for shot, beat for beat remake Resident Evil 4 in the new engine, and then if they want to make any changes, they have to make that story B, which there was no story B. There was a New Game Plus, which was just playing the game a second time. So yeah, I really have no idea how they're going to satisfy two very divergent groups of fandom there. And it certainly is a question as far as what about Code Veronica? And what about Resident Evil Resistance? And what about any other side story? Like, are they gonna try and wrap up that stuff and have some element there, or is Code Veronica gonna be some kind of expansion DLC for Resident Evil 3 remake, or what? Oh, like, the Capcom is kind of falling right back into old bad habits of making too many Resident Evil games too fast at this rate. But anyways, Gamatsu had the same article. Resident Evil 3 remake shipments and digital sales topped 2 million in the first 5 days. Resident Evil 2 remake topped 6.5 million. Yeah, I just a lot of room for failure if they're not careful. Alright, well, I'm gonna put this here. Put this here. And then I've got to basically attack with this. And I think that's pretty much all I can do. Is attack with that and let it die. I shouldn't have attacked with that. That was stupid. I should have just held on to it. Because he'll just let that go through and it will do 1 damage. If he's smart. Otherwise he'll defend. Which... yeah, there was really no benefit of doing that at all. So all this does now is threaten to kill one of these guys. One of these 3 guys. Right. Tap target. Play. I still don't have enough here, though. Gamatsu has an article. This week's Japanese games releases: The Fox Awaits Me, Olympia Soares, and more. Usually, apparently these are all only Switch games, and usually they don't have a article that covers all the games that come out in a week. So these are like visual novel Switch games, and they came out in Japan, and seems like only 2 were physical as they're shutting things down in Japan. And then you have a game called Save Your Nuts, Super Pixel Racer, and that's it. So 4 games apparently came out today or this week in general. Wait, no. Darn it. Darn it. I have to be able to block all 3 of these, and I just failed to do that. So, is there some other way? Nope. That just failed. Wasn't paying enough attention. I want to get the gold tier. It'd be nice. But I wouldn't be surprised if I can't really do it. We've got like 7 victories today. We're doing really well compared to the past couple gameplay streams where I've barely been able to pay attention and maybe got 2 or 3 wins. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Dragon Ride VR, which doesn't look exactly like a dragon from Skyrim, but if you told me they'd stolen it from Skyrim, I'd believe you. So you're riding a dragon and you're shooting at things, and maybe you're doing a little Tamagotchi with dragons too. Kind of like a Spyro the Dragon idea in VR. $17.99, single player, requires VR of course. Bunch of languages. I'm willing to put this on the follow list. It doesn't look amazingly impressive, but I could see if you had a VR headset and you wanted to ride a dragon, or you had kids that wanted to ride a dragon, there's something there that would potentially satisfy that desire. Gamatsu has an article here. Genshin Impact producer Hugh Sai closed beta end message. So this end message says development began 3 years ago, 500 in-house hours of development. So it's just like a end message. Alright, interesting. Not really newsworthy. 500 in-house hours of in-house developers at work on the project. 500 developers on a project is a lot, but you could certainly manipulate those numbers quite a bit if you're saying like any person who touches the project or works in the building is an in-house developer in some way. If you're saying like the janitor is an in-house developer, that's how you could get the number up. Or it could be that it's 500 in-house developers because you've got a team of 200 hand animators animating everything. But certainly I've seen AAA games that seem to have less than 100 people work on it. And Genshin Impact is one of those games I keep hearing the name of. It doesn't mean it's good or anything, it just means that it's got that Japanese advertisement model, which is all about putting out as much new bit of news on things as often as possible. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Touhou Mechanical Scrollery, launching April 24th. 3D bullet hell midair hunting action game. Which, yeah, the Touhou series seems to constantly change. It's always anime witch girls. That much I've got. But I don't know where Touhou really comes from, other than most of them look like bullet hell games of some sort, usually 2D bullet hell games. This actually looks very interesting if this can pull this off. What's funny is it's labeled as a Touhou Project fan game, and this little image thumbnail here kinda doesn't line up at all with the actual gameplay that's shown. Which I can't say I hate that. I usually sort of frown on deceptive thumbnails, but an artistic rendering of a thumbnail is sometimes excusable, particularly when you've got like a 3D game that would not look good in 3D elements. And then like when you look here, there obviously is going to be some conversation pieces that are in line with that thumbnail, just the majority of the actual gameplay is going to be in 3D. And she looks fairly close to that. So this is coming out April 23rd, English, Japanese, and Chinese. I'll put that on the follow list. Can we do this? Next, all attack. Why could that work? Interesting. Well, whatever. This isn't an instant spell, so I can't cast it right now, unfortunately. Alright, well. Tried my best. He's gonna have to pick either this one or this one. And I'm gonna have to potentially weather a storm here as I try to get Bolas Citadel to replenish my hand. So let's play this. Play this. I don't even want to play this right now because I need Bolas Citadel. There's kind of nothing I can bring back to the field in the next 2 turns that would help me. I should have left some mana to use the spinning wheel on one of these. So here's Gamatsu's article. Rumor Resident Evil 4 remake and development at M2. So it has entered full production at the Osaka-based M2, the studio founded by former Platinum Games president Tatsuya Miyanami, with an estimated release window of 2022. M2 provided development support on this year's Resident Evil 3 remake, which was led by director Kiyohiko Sakata of Redworks, with additional support by internal Capcom staff and external terms. Take note here, very little of this seems to be developed actually by Capcom, which I guess maybe Capcom internally is just working on Resident Evil 8, which I guess is the right move. But the thing here to be cautiously pessimistic about is this sentence here. The RE3 remake reportedly has the blessing of Shinji Mikami, director of the original Resident Evil 4, who is said to have declined an approach to lead the project, but has provided advice on its direction. Now remember, there is also a fan-based remake of Resident Evil 4 to redo all the textures by hand and make it look just HD. That fan remake that had not yet been DMCA'd might get DMCA'd as soon as very soon now, or maybe it will be left to its own devices, and whenever that gets finished and comes out, maybe that will be the remake that fans of the original Resident Evil 4 want to play, whereas this official remake may very well be a very different experience, maybe a better experience, although that would be a hard sell certainly for fans of the RE4, and RE4 is probably my third favorite game, behind like Portal 1 and Portal 2. And it's always a shame every time I try to play it, it hitches up and runs terribly on my computer. And so I don't want to ruin the experience by trying to play through the game and having a terrible experience. Oddly, like the Wii version of RE4 is probably still the best version of the game. Alright, I'm probably gonna lose here. Let's see. This article goes on, while many original RE4 staff still remain at Capcom, their involvement in the rumored remake is unclear. One person with knowledge of the development told VGC the remake is being directed by a newcomer to the Resident Evil series. VGC also recently reported that Resident Evil 8 is in development with a 2021 release window for current and next generation platforms. Like Resident Evil 7, it's said to feature first-person perspective and return of protagonist Ethan Winters, while also taking many narrative and mechanical departures for the series, including hallucinations and insanity segments, as well as enemies based on mythological creatures such as werewolves. I didn't even get that story. Let's see. Kimetsu also heard from one source with ongoings at Capcom about the developer of Resident Evil 4 remake at M2 and the first-person RE8 as well as RE8 will feature PlayStation VR support like its predecessor, which almost guarantees that PlayStation will have VR for its PS5. So, it seems a little risky. It maybe not hugely risky because Platinum Games has done some great games, although I'm not sure Platinum Games with Nier Automata and Bayonetta, I'm not sure either one of those games really lines up with a Resident Evil 4 style game, and the guy who left Platinum Games may not be the best person from Platinum Games. Or maybe he was. So it would be kind of a terrible monkey's paw wish if we got a RE4 remake and it was great, and then Bayonetta 3 came out and it was terrible, or we got a Bayonetta 3 and it was great, and then RE4 remake came out and it was terrible. Actually, it wouldn't be terrible as bad that way. There very little can happen to erase Resident Evil 4. They could take it down from storefronts, certainly, the old versions, but people could always play that, pirated it or whatever. Whereas if Bayonetta 3 comes out and it's terrible, there probably will be very little that could be done to fix that. My biggest fear, though, is here we look at the screenshot of RE4. What if they got rid of the dog, or the dog looks completely different? What if they completely change the way Leon looks? What if they completely change how the inventory works? What if they get rid of trees? What if they get rid of this guy? What if it's just Mr. X all over again? What if they try to rewrite the whole story of Resident Evil 4 to tie it back into to the stories of all the other Resident Evil games, and it is just more zombies, and they take the whole Las Plagas element out as far as a storyline plot? What if they throw Umbrella into Resident Evil 4? On the other hand, if we're going to play what if for bad things that could happen to through the process of remaking Resident Evil 4. It's, I think, also fair to say, what if they fix RE4? And by fixing RE4, I mean, what if they took the good parts of the stories of RE5 and 6 and merged those also in RE4? You kind of don't even really need to tell you the story of RE6, because there was very little story there in the first place. But the fight when you against Jill in RE5, and some of the stuff in RE5 is not bad. Plus, if they were to merge some of the elements, some of the fights, some of the concepts, some of the ideas there into RE5, they could take a large butcher knife to RE5 and take out all of the scenes in which you're shooting Africans, or they could take out Sheva, they could take out Africa almost completely. So the tribal Africans that you're fighting that are zombies, and the modern Africans that you're fighting, because there were definitely accusations of racism that were probably slightly unfairly put against RE5. So you could kind of take all of that out and just instead have Wesker, the final battle for with Wesker, every battle with Wesker, you could put that in RE4. If you were going to remake it and merge the two games, the Jill fight, you could take several of the sequences from the previous game and merge it and just have it with Spanish Las Plagas characters. And then I'm trying to think if there's any real important bit of information in RE6 that really needs to be told. There's like a section when you're in a college, so that scene wasn't a terrible scene. It should be used somewhere. If you're going to try to merge 3 games into one remake. But if Capcom was really going to do that, then they probably should have taken like Code Veronica and put that in as some form of DLC, or just added content and a way to make just do something to use Code Veronica and Mission Zero and all of that. Exile a card in my hand or permanently control. Darn it.
My schemes are never ending.
So this guy's a legendary planeswalker. If he gets 8, he wins the game. This Nicholas Bolas Dragon God card. It sucks. So we'll just attack it with everything.
A feeble effort.
And yeah, I don't think that an RE4 remake could do much more than take the elements of RE5 and merge it together. Take the parts that they want and just skip over the story of RE5. The vast majority of RE5's story is not something that needs to be repeated to put you in line for RE7 story. Yeah, because it really is kind of just its own side story.
Loyal and silent.
And the same is even more true for RE6. So they could kind of fix some major problems there. This guy's gonna try to make me run out of cards. This guy's gonna directly contradict this card. And this one's gonna try and make zombies.
Your boldness is so... get out of my way!
Darn it. All he seems to have is planeswalkers.
You are all so generous.
I don't have enough mana to play this, unfortunately. Otherwise I could get further. Next game we have on Steam is called Speed Fighters. Seems like it's just some anime girls in bikinis in the thumbnail and on the side, but really it's just a low effort shoot 'em up game. Yep. $19.99, English, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. This could be a Japanese game, it could be a Chinese game. Either way, it just looks like a shoot 'em up. I don't know if it's a low effort one or not. I'm really not even smart enough to be able to tell that from screenshots. Right. Next. Attack this. Attack this. And then attack this. This is the one we need to get rid of before anything else. That works out perfectly. I don't know why he...
No!
Seriously?
Death is enlightening.
So whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. Each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. If you were to draw a card, you'd run out. So he's trying to mill himself. That doesn't really strike me as a smart move. Next we have a game on Steam called The Chronicles of Robin Hood, the King of Thieves, which is just a Candy Crush game, which looks particularly bad with a solid blue screen on that background. It's $4.99, English, French, and German, and yeah, it's just totally not worth $4.99. And I don't know if you'd really ever want to play a Candy Crush game on Steam or on PC.
I have just the trick for this.
What does this guy do?
I fight with a dragon's rage.
He's just got like nothing but planeswalkers.
Easy to find in war.
Nothing but planeswalkers.
Awaken!
That's weird.
Might demands power.
That's really weird. So who do we want to kill? Well, unless he's trying to fake me out. I think I want to kill this one. But am I going to really kill it?
They were a lousy
Yeah, I did.
servant anyway.
Alright. Alright, next turn. attack here, attack here, attack here.
Listen time with watch this.
I don't know what he just did. Didn't seem like it worked. Did nothing because he doesn't control a dragon. Interesting. Let's see. Here's the VGC article in itself. Doesn't seem like there's much more to be said here. Yeah. The more I think about it, though, I doubt Resident Evil 4 is going to have a first-person perspective. But if they took the parts of RE5 and put it in RE4's remake, that would be a genius move. It'd also make the game super, super long, though, so I don't know how you get around that. Because you really don't want to edit any part of RE4 out. You can edit out almost all of RE5. So, more than likely what they would do is much like the remake of RE2. RE2 seems like it's a decent spiritual remake of RE2, whereas RE3 has been claimed to be kind of a short, lower effort development. Alright. I have no idea how I'm gonna solve this. I should have probably attacked with that one, come to think of it.
I am the master here.
This is just crazy.
When you understand reality,
See.
you understand.
Rise and shine.
What is the ability that he's using to turn all of his planeswalkers into creatures?
Let's try this.
Kind of the only thing that would save me is Bowl Citadel. More than anything else, yeah. Need that Bowl Citadel.
Come to me.
Alright, so it was until the end of the turn, each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 red dragon creature. Interesting. Do I want to bring back something with Death Touch and Afterlife? Or do I want to bring back a cat? I'll bring back Death Touch with Afterlife. That's actually way more useful. Okay. Next. Attack, attack, attack. There.
Come on, come on.
This guy's pretty terrible.
Waste not one. I'll find a use for you later.
See, I could play this, but why can't I sacrifice a creature? Why is this not working? Is there something here that says I can't sacrifice a creature?
I know 88 ways to defeat you. Pick one.
Now we're at a point where they can't even show all the cards at the same time. He's got 8 planeswalkers.
There's no accounting for luck. Maybe
This is
yours
gonna go on
will
for a while.
hold.
Next we have a game on Steam called Minnie's Adventure, which just looks like a very low effort game of some sort, platformer as best I can guess. $1.75 English and Portuguese, Brazil. Sacrifice 2 creatures.
Are you ready?
So he's got me beat. And the only thing I guess I could have done was maybe kill that guy. But I can't play this because this is not an instant. So that would have been nice if I could have done Taste of Death. We're falling down the tier, but we might as well keep on playing and keep on trying. Because we're fairly paying attention here. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam here called Echoes of a Nocturnal Chords. Nocturnal. Oh, yeah. I was totally misreading that. So this looks like it is half JRPG, half horror visual novel. Generally I would say no because it's just a JRPG. And English was not supported, so I guess that is a no. It's also $1.39 discounted, so it's probably a cheap Chinese game. Yep, Chinese only. So, yeah. This one's not making it to the fall list. Flashing lights, too. Which can be a danger. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Boot Camp Fitness, which seems to be like fitness 3D models doing actions with kind of random generic backgrounds. This video is showing a real live person in the trailer. I imagine that's not actually in the game. It probably is a low effort attempt at a fitness game, which we haven't seen a lot of that. And there's certainly a danger in exercising in front of a TV instead of exercising in front of a mirror so you can see if you're doing the form right yourself for your body. You'd honestly be better off turning off your TV and using it as a mirror, or putting a webcam in front of yourself. So I don't know if I can really encourage too many exercise things. The difference with like Ring Fit Adventure and even Wii Fit is those systems had some feedback to actually tell if you're doing the exercise right. You kind of have to know that your form is always perfect and you never mess up your form, which seems unrealistic when exercising, to play a game that's just gonna... It's like watching an exercise video, which again, those exist, but maybe you shouldn't follow them too much or use them for guidance. This specific game is labeled Early Access for $9.34. It says it's fully playable, English full audio. And it totally isn't a game I'd ever play. Like, I definitely would not be able to do some of these exercises, almost certainly. And I don't know how in the world I'd really criticize this because I'm not an expert in exercising and form at all. but I guess I'm smart enough to know what I don't know there. Let's see. Next we have a game called Lusitania, I believe is how that's pronounced, which was, I believe, the sister ship to the Titanic. And yeah, it looks like it's kind of an emptyless ship that will, I think, just crash and sink like the Titanic also. $2.09, English full audio. Yeah. Nothing here looks interesting at all. There's a Seinfeld episode where someone claims to be a survivor of a ship that sank, and George Costanza did research on the ship they talked about, and he was like, yeah, one person died and it took the ship 36 hours to sink, and they were just off the coast of like New York or something. So while it was true that the ship sank, it was not a fast, horrible event that the person was implying it was to get its sympathy. But George Costanza couldn't call the person out on their BS because he would then look like a jerk, and I think that's probably what he did anyways in that Seinfeld episode. That might have been the Lusitania, actually, but maybe not. Only have maybe 5 more tabs. Next we have a game called Madness Fantasy, which looks like an RPG Maker game. I don't feel like this animation is polished enough. It looks a little dull and drab. I don't like that it's not widescreen. And I definitely don't like that it looks like an RPG game, an RPG Maker game. It's $10.49 discounted to English and Italian. Yeah. They're just never really going to sell me on a game like that. There's too many better RPGs out there. I would rather play 10 3D RPG games with anime girls or Monster Hunter or something like that. Even like one of the worst Monster Hunter games. I'd much rather play that than play an RPG, a NES 8-bit RPG looking game. And that even kind of applies to things like Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like any of those games that have either very early 3D modeling or no 3D modeling, probably don't want to spend any time playing them. It's just I'd rather not. If I am going to play any RPG games at all, they're going to be extremely limited games. So, like the Double Fine RPG Death Spank, which is really limited and has a beginning and an end to its story, is kind of a great example of what I'm looking for in an RPG. I don't want something that you have to grind 200 hours into. And I don't want something that looks ugly. Next game we have on Steam is called Tactics and Strategy Master Gemini Strategy, which that's a long name, so it feels like maybe it's a Chinese game. It looks like a strategy placement game with a lot of other sub elements, which again makes me feel like it's Chinese. $8.99, English, Chinese full audio, and Japanese. Yep. So -3, -3. Well, if he's gonna do that, let's just sacrifice him. Might as well. see if we can do more damage than he can do. TechRaptor has an article. Rogue Legacy 2 details promise a fully realized Metroidvania game. I don't really know if I even want Rogue Legacy to be a fully realized Metroidvania game. Rogue Legacy 1 had 4 specific worlds that were all in a specific direction. If it started to get to a point where there was 8 or 9 specific worlds and they interconnected and you had to go back and forth and you had to get upgrades to your weapons. I mean, that's really what a Metroid game would be, is you have to go to different ways to get different guns, which are effectively different keys. And if you're going to go with the Castlevania elements, then you're going to have a lot of monsters and a lot of backtracking and a lot of doing the same content over again. If anything, I would kind of argue that Rogue Legacy 1 was a streamlined version of what a Metroid or a Castlevania game is, and it would actually be a little bit of a step in the wrong direction, step backwards, for them to try and add even more content there. They eventually updated Rogue Legacy 1 to have a new Game Plus elements that kind of gives you 4 enemies, but the next gives you like 8 enemies, 4 late game enemies replacing the original 4 enemies. But I'm not sure I really want much more there. The bigger danger is that Rogue Legacy would get away from its concept of family members having different randomized traits, and the randomized traits drastically affecting your experience in the game. Both Castlevania and Metroidvania games don't work that way at all. Any character that you play as in a Metroidvania normally would be the only character that you could play as. So, yeah. It's one sales pitch. It's one gaming hook. Is it in danger of being minimalized? Or if they really make it a true Metroidvania? And I would much prefer Rogue Legacy 2 to do something different and unique instead of just becoming more of the same, which is a constant problem in video games, is that people just all homogenize into one gray blob. Moving on, TechRaptor has an updated article. CMON audit could shut down the company. I imagine a lot of companies are going to be shut down. Trading has been suspended for nearly 2 weeks. A CMON audit is potentially putting a tabletop gaming publisher in danger of closure, and it's not entirely clear what's going on. Let's see what the update is, but this has more to do with tabletop gaming and video games. Let's see. What was the update? Kickstarter games in general might be in trouble. It's labeled as updated, but I don't see anything in this article that actually says updated. So yeah. Times will be tough for board games, almost certainly. There's no reason not to assume that times will be tough for board games and Kickstarters in general. TechRaptor has an article here. China blocks the sale of Animal Crossing New Horizons. Pattern creation is likely to blame, is what they're saying. I guess that is the possibility, is that because of the QR code pattern creations, they could put something that China doesn't approve of in Animal Crossing and show it off. I've seen at least 2 instances of people using the pattern creations in Animal Crossings to do something not age appropriate to the age release, to the age group that Animal Crossing is sold at, using the QR codes. So yeah, I could get that. I could see that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it has really nothing to do with it, that at all. Here's some examples. There's a sickle and hammer, and then some Asian characters that probably spell out something China doesn't like in the background. I couldn't tell you for 1 second what that says. I kind of feel like Nintendo would be more than willing to restrict pattern creation, though, in the Chinese version of Animal Crossing, if that was the only problem. I feel like China is in general just trying to throw their weight around, which is what they constantly do. Like, the number one thing that we could learn from this COVID-19 thing is to stop doing business with China. And Nintendo kind of learned that lesson, and they've moved a lot of the Switch production to Vietnam, which I don't know if that's any real better, but okay. But yeah, we really need to stop. First world countries need to stop making the mistake of allowing third world and second world countries to gain power they don't deserve by exploiting their own populace as a cheap labor class, in my opinion. And first world countries should really just start to be more insular and have their own citizens building and developing a lot of things, and just being willing to pay their employees more, and not export and import a lot of this stuff, like, particularly when it's unimportant things, electronics, gadgets, things like that. I could get exporting and importing things that you can't get in your own country, food, oil, things like that, but other things that you can just as easily produce inside your own country probably are better off that way. See, moving on. Gamatsu has an article here. Yumi Yetsusu Remaster and Re-After launch April 23rd in the West for the Switch and PC, and later for the PS4 and PS Vita. Those 2 versions are delayed due to COVID-19. This looks like 2 visual novel games. Is there anything else I can get from that? Now I could go to the Steam page, and it's tagged with nudity. So let me just double check and make sure it's YouTube family friendly. Gotta make sure it's YouTube family friendly in the screenshots, and it seems like it is. So it seems like it's a visual novel with sexual content and nudity, where you're kind of a rich guy who has some maids. Standard fantasy fare. Looks like it. Maybe one of the characters is military. character, which is a little weird. English is not supported for this game right now, and it's selling for $64.99. Japanese full audio. So, yeah. It must either be really, really overpriced, or it is a really, really good game. Clicked on a link that led me nowhere to Steam. So I'm looking at Steam's homepage while we're here. Code Vein is on sale as the top seller. What is also in the daily sales? I don't really talk about them, but we very well may not need to start talking about them. Free weekend on Hitman, $36 for Code Vein. And that's about it. Or anything that interests me, at least. Ark Survival Evolved is down to $10. I don't think anybody's playing that. Subnautica's down to $20. We Happy Few's down to $15. Resident Evil 2 is down to $20. But I suspect you're still gonna pay a lot. Rocket League is down to $10. A lot of those games though have DLC, and they're not being completely honest on the prices here. Like, while We Happy Few only has a little bit of DLC, and RE2 I don't think has any DLC, Rocket League has a ton of DLC. Three more tabs and then we'll be done, and I guess this will just be our last recording because I'm not paying quite enough attention to think that I'm actually going to get up in the rank, and so I'll probably spend a couple hours just playing off screen to get 10 victories, and then I'll start thinking about recording some other things. Because, yeah, I don't think it's particularly worthwhile to spend the rest of one of these days and try and get 15 victories. Although today would be a good day to do that so that we get all the Mastery Pass experiences we can with this. So I may just end up spending the rest of the day doing that. So we have a tab here for a game called Boom Boom Boomerang, where you're in VR throwing a boomerang, which the 2D boomerang throwing has always been basically shooting a yo-yo out and it coming back to you. So it's no surprise there really haven't been any boomerang throwing games in 2D. 3D games with boomerang throwing are, as far as I know, non-existent. So this is a slightly interesting idea, but in practice and implementation just looks kind of like a standard VR game where you stand in one place and shoot things. It's $8.70 discounted, English full audio, and VR only. It's just... There is a boomerang in Rage 1 that was rather fun, and I guess they brought the boomerang back in Rage 2, which people have totally forgotten about that game, and that's I think what it deserved. But I can't think of any other game with boomerangs in it really. Next we have a game on Steam called Alder's Blood, which says it's an RPG game. It looks like it might be a turn-based RPG. Kind of a Darkest Dungeon if you weren't going to play, if it wasn't a dungeon crawler. It's rated mostly positive. It looks interesting. $14.99, English full audio. So we got a couple of things here that are going to make it to the fall list once I log back in. But not anything amazing or hugely interesting. Here we have a game on Steam called Deep in the Forest, which is tagged as an RPG. Looks like it's a card-based RPG. I kind of like the different art here, though. Like, this definitely is something different. It's not terrible Western art, and it's not bright and colorful Eastern anime art. I might put it somewhere close to maybe a European art style or an older American art style from like a couple hundred years ago, or Western art style. $12.99, English and Russian. So it might be a low effort Russian game, but the polish seems to disagree with that. So I'll put that on the fall list. That brings me to the Humble Bundle, and this, I may have already talked about this, but there's this Minecraft Java map that I want to cover at some point called Witchcraft and Wizardry, the Flu Network. If we play this for a second, it's Harry Potter and Minecraft with a lot of mini games. So not only do you have this giant Hogwarts castle to fly around, but you also have the ability to shoot targets. Targets were recently added to the base of Minecraft without having to do any kind of Minecraft trickery. So I guess if you reskinned a wand as a bow and targets as targets, that would work. But there's definitely some other things certainly happening during all this. Here they're playing Quidditch. So yeah, that's a map maybe at some point I'll get around to playing in Minecraft. I've been watching a lot of Minecraft lately, so I wouldn't be surprised if that does convince me to get back into Minecraft. They've added a decent amount of additions to Minecraft lately. And as far as the Humble Bundles are concerned, there's no new Humble Bundles. So that then just brings me to my Twitter feed. And I stopped my timer, but I imagine we've been going 2 hours to 3 hours. And I bet there's not a ton of news. So let's scroll down my Twitter feed. See, Valve patents Steam controller with swappable parts. That might be an interesting way to go. Although, I don't know how swappable the parts really could be. At a certain point, you're just going to be building a controller from scratch, which might not be a terrible idea. Still scrolling down. Yeah, literally 2 things. So TechRaptor has an article here. Valorant anti-cheat is causing other games problems. Starts on startup at the driver level, apparently causing lag. So I wasn't going to play Valorant anyways, but that is seemingly an extreme anti-cheat spyware type software. TechRaptor has an article, Valve patents Steam controller with swappable parts. I don't really like the Valve controller, so if you could say swap out these buttons so that it was an Xbox controller and swap out this so it was an Xbox controller, there might be something interesting there, but then that probably kills the whole touchpad idea. So it really seems like the only thing that's swappable is going from an analog stick to a D-pad, which isn't much of a change. The idea of a adjustable controller, though, is an idea that was in the Xbox Pro Elite controller. So that concept being done for all controllers going forward would be an interesting concept, certainly. Or at least all the top of the line controllers going forward. Gametsu had an article here. Utawaru Mono Prelude to the Fallen gameplay trailer is now available. Which this seems to be an RPG game with blood, partial nudity, and other content. It doesn't really look like it could be that objectionable, as it looks like it is just a really complicated position-based strategy game. So, yeah, it's due out late May for the PS4 and Vita. And yeah, that is that. It'll be interesting to see if the stream quality ever fixed itself. I don't think it quite did. Yeah, it did. It got the drop frames down to a reasonable amount after I stopped the YouTube from streaming the video back. Well, that's going to be it for this recording. I'm fairly happy with this. Maybe still not as energetic as people would like. Maybe I'll never really get there. I'm not sure I ever was there in the first place, or could have ever promised that. But I've been able to do this whole stream and not have to complain or be in pain. And so we're making progress. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.